Hello and welcome to the interview. He's been called Europe's last dictator, ruling the former Soviet Republic of Belarus for the last 20 years. Alexander Lukashenko doesn't take kindly to opponents. Many have been harassed or jailed, including my guest today, Andrei Sannikov. He was sentenced to 5 years in jail for organizing protests over the 2010 elections. Before becoming an opposition activist and co-founder of the human rights initiative Charter 97, Andrei Sannikov was a career diplomat specializing in nuclear arms control. Welcome to the program.
Well, welcome. Thank you.
I want to start with the situation in Ukraine. Russia has come under some sanctions from the West. Of course, Belarus is no stranger to such sanctions. Do they actually work?
Well, if they're serious, they do work. But if there are loopholes, as in the case of Belarus, because we do have some officials under sanctions, I call it rather travel ban, a visa ban and sanctions. But still, even Lukashenko managed to go to the West, to Europe for vacation, for expensive vacations, during the period when sanctions were imposed against him. So, and I think that, yes, they do work if it's not only travel ban, but it's also economic sanctions directed against those who are supporting such regimes as in Belarus.
What about
regime.
the asset freezes? Have they had any effect on officials in Belarus?
Well, the officials claim that they don't have assets, but we did have a case when one of the officials close to Lukashenko tried to use the credit card in New York, but it was blocked. So they do work again when they're imposed. Because I was released because of the sanctions, and because of the sanctions against the bagmen of the regime. Immediately after they were introduced for the first time in our history, against those people who support Lukashenko financially, me and my friend were released from jail.
What do you make of the sanctions imposed on Russia so far? Do you think they have any chance of being effective?
Well, we can judge the sanctions imposed against Russia by the activities of Russia in Ukraine. And since the activities are becoming more and more aggressive, that we can clearly say that they do not work. They're going in the right direction, but it's very slow. And I think that in case of Russia, the sanctions have to be comprehensive, including political, economic, financial, and yes, military.
Let's talk about the regional implications of this whole crisis. What do you think? What do you think it means for all the neighboring states?
It's not only for neighboring states. I don't think we are allowed to narrow this problem to the region. Of course, they are of paramount importance to the region. They're extremely important for Belarus because what is going on today, it's not only the occupation and annexation of Crimea, aggression of Russia in Ukraine, it's a fierce defense of the dictatorial regimes that were established on the territory of the former Soviet Union. And what the Kremlin is doing today, it's not directed against the region only, it's directed against Europe itself, and it has to be recognized in Europe that the aim is to destroy Europe, European relations, European Union.
And you've argued that Europe has not really taken the measure of this challenge, that Europe in fact faces a crisis of values, as you've described it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's the gist of the problem, because what Ukraine did on Maidan and what Ukraine demonstrated with its heroic defending of its own future, it demonstrated the extremely important support for values. And that's what was all about in Maidan. And Europe has to recognize that it's no more geopolitics. There has to be no place for realpolitik. It's about values. And if the accent is shifted in this direction to defend values and to help Ukraine defend values that the European Union is built upon, then it will make a difference.
It must be very hard for you, though, when you meet Western officials or members of the European Parliament or people like that, to really persuade them along that basis. The values argument is a very difficult one to use for persuasion, isn't it?
You know, in words, it's not... everybody makes statements about values, but in real life, it's not always that they do defend values. And in case of Belarus, you know, it's been going on for too long time. And yes, we do have a lot of frustration as regards the European resoluteness to support values, including in Belarus. Yes, sometimes it's frustrating, but I think that there are more and more, I see now more and more people waking up because of what Kremlin is doing.
And of course, as you said, the very specific sanctions did help to get you released. Just tell us a little bit about your experience. Of course, you stood in the presidential election in 2010. You had the second highest percentage of the popular votes after Alexander Lukashenko. What happened after that?
Well, I would even add more, because votes are not counted in Belarus, and it was clear, not only for me, but I think for almost everybody in Belarus, that there should have been a second round of elections. And then Lukashenko would have stand no chance. But the experience is, if you challenge the dictator, you definitely have to be aware of the risks that are involved. But still, there was a quite active campaign of the alternative candidates, oppositional candidates. I say alternative because not all of them were up in the opposition. And I think that it was visible that no way Lukashenko could have won the support needed to become re-elected. So, but he got so scared because again, it was visible that people were against him. He got so scared that he brutally dispersed the very peaceful demonstration using violence, a lot of violence, and put almost every oppositional candidate in jail, including about 1,000 people as well.
Do you think the opposition bears some responsibility for the situation in Ukraine by not being able to come to a unified approach?
It is not needed to be unified when you fight dictatorship. Sometimes it is much better to be decentralized, to prepare, as was demonstrated during the presidential campaign of 2010. But yes, of course, there is not only one guilty party in every situation. But you have to bear in mind that we have this ruthless dictatorship, most ruthless dictatorship in Europe, for 20 years already. And the opposition leaders were killed. That's why I'm calling on Europe all the time to react immediately and strongly. We had those people who were a real alternative to Lukashenko and very popular, killed in 1999. And these cases are still not investigated. The only document that was produced by the Council of Europe was produced in 2004. But still there are some measures to be taken.
So just there have been verbal condemnations from Europe, but not much
There
else?
was not only verbal. I'm mentioning this report of the Council of Europe. It's quite a solid basis to go on further, to follow up on this report. I think what Bill Browder did with Magnitsky case is extremely important, because if we're talking about sanctions, they're kind of act of will. They're imposed when there is a conflict, and then they're lifted when there is not conflict.
Okay.
But it doesn't make people not guilty for the crimes they committed, so we need legislation.
But just to come back to my earlier point, though, about having a united opposition or not, isn't it a problem when you have some opposition people saying we have to boycott elections, and others saying, no, we have to take part and have our voice heard even in difficult circumstances?
We did have an example when we were united boycotting elections in 2000, parliamentary election. We did have single candidates when opposition rallied behind one person, basically, in 2001, 2006. But it's a dictatorship. It's not. Sometimes there is a conceptual misunderstanding that the West, the democratic world, waits that some democratic institution would work in the situation like Belarus. No, they will not. And the most important democratic institute is the election, which were actually the last elections which was held in Belarus. The first and the last was in '94 when Lukashenko was elected as a result of the protest vote. But this democratic institution is ruined, and he immediately destroyed it. That's why don't expect let's say, legally understandable for the Europeans behavior in the countries of dictatorship.
So how's change going to happen? I mean, it's not... the opposition obviously hasn't managed to force out Lukashenko in 20 years. Europe is not able to do very much. What's the answer?
I think if we wish good for Belarus, and we have to concentrate on getting rid of dictatorship. And now, with the situation being opened by Russian aggression against Ukraine, we have to see not only the tragedy and the conflict, but also the possibilities. A lot depends now on the West. You said it correctly. You nailed the problem. It's about values. And let us all spare no effort to support these values, and then everything will be possible in Ukraine, in Belarus, and eventually in Russia.
Just one final question. Don't you think, though, that even if Lukashenko goes, which one day obviously must happen, Belarus is a borderland between Russia and the West. It's up for grabs, like Ukraine. Isn't that a basic trait that is going to continue?
I think that's the logic. I'm not accepting this logic. Because we have to do something about this approach, yeah? That one country could decide the fate of the other. And if the West is prepared to live with the aggressive Russia, imperialistic Russia that considers Ukraine, Belarus and other countries of the Soviet Union as their satellites or even their territories, then there is no future for Europe also, and has to be recognized. So I want to decide my own destiny. When Lukashenko is gone, it will be a good time to move in a different direction than towards dictatorship and totalitarianism.
So ultimately a question of European values. We'll have to end it there. Thank you so much for being a guest on the program. Andrei Sannikov, leader of the civic campaign European Belarus. That's all for this edition of the interview on France 24. Do stay tuned for more news coming up.